Hello there, welcome to Guitar Show, and this is Coffee Chat number 6. Right, okay, when PRS decide to sponsor us, we're going to do a really fancy introduction with real coffee beans and titles and everything, but haven't heard back from them just yet, so still waiting. Right, I want to talk about this pedal here. This is called a Musky. I talked about this in my last video. Apparently some of you guys have told me it's not working, it's actually failing. So it's not all of them. I haven't had any problems myself. But just one thing you might want to research is the reliability of these. They're very cheap, very good, but if they are failing on you, then I wouldn't recommend them. But anyway, that's just one thing I wanted to point out. Okay, so let's get to this video. What guitar amp should I buy? Okay, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is what tone do you want to have. That's really important, is the guitar sound. Are you really precious about the guitar sounding a certain way, you know? Do you want it to sound like Dickie Betts on Stormy Monday at the Fillmore East? Do you want it to sound like Eric Clapton on the Blues Breakers? Do you want lots of different tones? Do you want an amp that's really, really flexible? In which case you're going to have to go down the Kempler Axe Effects kind of modelling route. It could be that you're like me and you kind of hear one specific sound from maybe a multitude of players of a certain type of era or style, and you want to go for that kind of approach, which is what I did. I try to change my sound personally every 5 years just to stay fresh and inspired and create new music. You know, I feel it helps to really change my guitar amps, go for a completely different sound, and that keeps things fresh. So that's a thing to think about. Right, so are you going to go solid state, modelling, or tube or valve, as we say in England? So first of all, I would say basically solid state amps are very good. I know you'll probably be surprised, but if you think about early Robin Ford, Mike Stern, John Scofield, all use Yamaha amplifiers. So you know those guys are incredible guitar players, and they're all using Yamaha for the basic reason that they really replicate the guitar sound in a musical way. So it could be that you want to go down that route of a solid state amp. I know a lot of jazz guys prefer to do that, and they have small little combos like AERs and whatever. I think that Peterson is another make, and you can get a great jazz tone, and it's small. You can carry it. You know, you can carry your guitar and have this little cube on your shoulder, and it works perfect. You know, so I fully endorse that. Something that's flexible. Roland Jazz Chorus, which is a very famous amp. It's a very famous tone. It's very powerful. I've been in some situations where that was kind of the only amp that really cut through them. You know. Lots of percussionists and drummers and really loud gig with not a very good PA, then a Roland Jazz Chorus is going to be your best friend, because you're going to it's a powerful amp, and it's going to get your clean rhythm sound out there, you know, to the audience. So Roland Jazz Choruses are also good. You know, PV did a lot of solid state amps like PV Bandits and things like that, and yeah, so don't write off solid state. I know there's some not so good in England, for example, in the UK. We had an amp called an H&H, and it was a lot of people's first sort of big amp. And for me, they don't sound very good at all. They sound horrible, you know, and the reverb on them is horrible, you know. So, but that's just my personal opinion, you know. I hate them, but other people love them, you know. So there you go. I think there was a guy who played H&H, who's Dr. Feelgood's guitar player, Wilco Johnson. He played H&H amps, so you know, you might want to check them out. Okay, let's talk about modelling amps. Well, personally, I'm not a fan of modelling amps, and I will tell you now why. Recently, my friend lent me one of them for a studio session, and I used it, and when I listened back to it, it wasn't to my normal level of tone, you know. I was disappointed, and I really struggled to get a good valve sound out of it. So that's my personal opinion, you know, but I'm really trying to get the best possible valve tone I can possibly get every time I play the guitar, you know. That's just my ethos, didn't work out for me. But however, the person that lent it to me, he uses it, tours with it all the time. He has a couple of them, and the benefits are that you can get a range of sounds. So you can get like a Marshall sound, you can get you know, you can get a Vox sound, you can get anything you think of. It can kind of do a rough approximation. Personally, I think maybe in 10 years' time, it could really be a possibility that they nail they start nailing these tones. But you know, I'm old school. I prefer valve gear. It's just my personal opinion. But I think where a modelling amp would really work out would be, for example, if you're doing a wedding band, and you're flying off to a gig, and you can just take this small little amp, put it in the overhead, you know, take it out, set up, and plug it through the PA. And that's fantastic. You've got all your effects, all your different sounds. You know, you're playing lots of different styles of music. It could be punk, rock, blues, you know, heavy metal, and it's going to work in all those situations. So that is fantastic. I think it's really good for that. But again, you know, I try to, myself personally, I try to get a certain tone, and not, you know, I don't want to have 5 different tones or 10 different sounds. I'm kind of old school in the fact where I have one sound, and I'm using that on everything. You know, that's kind of my ethos. You know? So that's one thing you want to think about. And then we come to valve, as we say in the UK, or tube, as you guys say in America and Canada. We come to those kind of amps, and this is where it gets really crazy, because you know, after all these years with all this technology, we're still using these 1950s amps. You know, these kind of those circuits. So what I want to say about that is, you can kind of compare it to the Stradivarius violin. You know, there was a point in the violin's history where you know, Stradivarius designed that violin, and that became the violin, the blueprint. That was it. It couldn't get any more perfect. So okay, since then people have been doing electric violins and all this kind of stuff, but really, you know, when you go and see an orchestra, you don't want the lead violinist to be playing an electric Yamaha violin. You want him to be playing, or her to be playing, a Stradivarius violin. So that's more or less the same. It's kind of happening with the electric guitar. Is that in 1950, the blueprint of Fender and Gibson and, you know, all those companies, and the amplifiers around that time, the design, it kind of went together, and that became the kind of the blueprint of what we're still using today. And that's kind of in one reason why we haven't moved on with technology as much as we could. So with that in mind, you know, it's really helpful to have a kind of a bass tone that you're trying to go for. And then you want to be thinking about this, the actual how many watts, how loud you want that amplifier to be. And again, 2 things to think about here. You know, what situation are you going to be using your amplifier in? If you're going to be using it in your home, how loud are you going to be able to get that amplifier? Some amps, such as Fender Blackface amps, sound really good at low volumes, because I think Fender designed that era of Fender amp to be used at any volume. So you can, for example, use a Fender Bandmaster, which is 45 watts. You can use it in your home to strum along to chords and sing acoustically, and it's going to sound great. But that same amp you can take to a concert, crank it up, and it's also going to sound really great. So that's kind of like a great amp to have, that kind of Blackface era amp. Other amps like AC15s, for example, and AC30s, for me, are kind of more going into the Marshall territory, where they really need to be turned up loud. Same with Tweed amps. You know, I think Fender Tweed era, you know, they can sound nice. Some of them can sound mellow, but I think a lot of them start to sound nice when they're compressed, more of a compressed sound that you're only going to get when you crank them up and you wind up the volume. Then that's when they sound really nice. Personally, that's my opinion. So that, you know, that's one thing to think about. You know, do you want to have Eric Clapton's sound on the Blues Breaker, where he just, you know, really play that amp loud? How are you going to get that sound? It could be that you get a small amp. I once saw Charlie Chandler, who's actually a good guitar player. He's a repairman here in London, and he's got a shop. Saw his band. He was using a 15 watt WEM and a 15 watt AC15, and he just got an amazing tone, because he's got small amps that are turned up in a pub, put in some nice, it had an Echoplex and a fuzz, and it just got an incredible tone. It got a really great tone, because, you know, he's using small amps. You know, he's not using big amps that are difficult to, you know, get up to that loud volume. So it may be that just for vanity, you want to look at a 100 watt Marshall amplifier, you know, JCM 800, because your favorite guitar player plays one. You know, it could be, you know, a guitarist, Zakk Wylde, or it could be Randy Rhoads played a JCM 800, and so that's the amplifier you want and you need. because they're your heroes. But you know, are you going to get that amplifier loud? But if you're playing in your flat or your home, there's no point to have it, you know, unless you want to look at it, you know, because they don't really sound good, I think, those kind of amps. Unless you're really, you know, playing loud with a bass and drums, that's when those amps really wake up and sound great. So that's one thing to think about. What about the weight of the amp? Do you want a heavy amp or do you want a lightweight amp? Coming back to the Kempler amp, it's a really lightweight amp. So it's a great amp to, if you're traveling a lot and that's your main priority is to travel, then a Kempler is a really good amp. You know, you can take it into a hotel room, put your headphones on, play along. It's fantastic, you know. So it could be that your job is doing that. You're a salesman and you're staying in a lot of hotels, and so a Kempler may really work for you in that situation. Also, let's bear in mind about how amplifiers are made when we talk about valve amps, because you've got point to point, and then you've got printed circuit boards, and you know, point to point has pros and cons, and printed circuit boards has pros and cons. For example, I'll give you one example. A lot of the Fender Tweed stuff, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you need to get a point to point ham wired Fender Tweed for it to sound really, really good. But I think there's an amp called a Sky King or a Sky Dog or something like that, and it's actually trying to replicate that sort of Fender Blackface era sound, and it's a very, very good sound. It's really reliable. It's great. Fuchs, for example, make Dumble clones, and you know, they are printed circuit boards, and they're very reliable. And I think with printed circuit boards, you're going to get consistency in tone. You know, the tone is going to be consistent throughout all the models. You know. Whereas with point to point, you know, sometimes you hear people say, "Oh, that Fender Twin sounds amazing," but the next one, same one serial number down the line, sounds terrible. Let's talk about effects loops and things like that. You know, do you want your amplifier to have an effects loop? For me, the only reason you need an effects loop is if you're going to have a 2-channel amp, say one clean channel, one overdrive, and then you want to use that overdrive with delays. Then you're going to need. That's good. Then you're going to need to have an effects loop, because the overdrive won't really work well with a delay in front of it. So if you've got a 2-channel amp, then it's good to have an effects loop. And Mesa Boogies and things like that, you know, really have you know, all those kind of extra features. Then you've got reverb, things like reverb. You know, I love reverb. I use it a lot. But you know, I have a separate unit to do that, my reverb nowadays. So you know, having reverb in an amp is not really a priority for me now. But at one point it was. I couldn't buy an amplifier without reverb, and I wanted a kind of a tube-driven spring reverb, as opposed to a digital reverb. And then I heard Gary Moore. He played through an Alesis MIDI verb rack reverb. It just sounded gorgeous, sounded really, really good. And that's only a 16-bit unit. It's not even a 24-bit unit. It sounded really, really good. So then I became a bit more open-minded about digital reverbs, and I thought, and I actually got one myself and started using that for a few years. So I've been down that route. I'm now back on spring valve-driven reverbs, but you know, like I said, digital reverbs can be really, really great as well. Right, okay, should you get a combo or a cabinet all in sort of 2 separate units? That again depends on how heavy you want the amp to be, because obviously a combo can be really heavy. It can be very, very heavy to lift, you know. For me personally, I prefer heads and cabs. I like to have a 1x12 cab now and a head. Then you can kind of mix and match and swap. So that's kind of another thing to think about. And the advantage, like I said, the advantage is you might want to use 10-inch speakers. You know, you might want to go down for a Tweed amp, having a small little 2x10-inch cab might be the solution. You know, Marshall made a run of sort of smaller, 4x10 cabs, which were really great and sound amazing. You know, with Celestion 4x10s. You know, and you can use them with you know, a 15-watt head and get a great sound out of that unit. You know, and with the speakers again, you know, a Viperverb, which is a Stevie Ray Vaughan style amp that he made famous, that had a 15-inch speaker. So 15-inch speakers can sound really awesome. You know, especially the old Jensen 15-inch is or what else? Altec Lansing do a 15-inch, JBLs do one. You know, all those sort of 15-inch speakers can sound wonderful. You know, in a certain application. Also, you need to think about: are you going to buy it new or are you going to buy it second hand? Basically, you buy it second hand. It's like a car, isn't it? You know, a modern amp. As soon as you take it out of the shop, it's knocking a load of money off it. So you know, it can be really, really good thing. But then with with a lot of Marshalls, they've been modified, and you don't know what's been modified. Same with Fenders. You know, you might buy one from the 70s or 80s, and a lot of the components have been changed. So it's really, really good idea to make sure that the circuit board hasn't been changed. Okay, let's talk about distortion from amps. There's 3 different types of distortion. The speaker distortion that you can get, say for example, you use 15 watt blues made by Celestians. They're very easy to distort in a high sort of volume situation, and they can sound really cool. You know, whereas an EV, which is an American speaker, is not going to give you much distortion, if any. So that's one type of distortion. Then you've got preamp distortion. Back in the 80s or late 70s, Paul Rivera kind of worked with Fender and designed a 2-channel amp situation where the preamp, you could distort on the preamp tubes, but the power amp would stay clean. And it's a different type of distortion, different type of overdrive. Dunbar also kind of is famous for that, for the preamp distortion. The 12AX7 tube, you know, being overdriven, but the power amp staying clean. So you've got this nice hi-fi clarity, but with all the smoothness of your preamp distortion. So a lot of amps kind of did that in the 1980s, and the first amp that I ever had actually was a Fender Super 60, which is a really great little combo, and it had a fantastic overdrive preamp distortion. Then you can get power amp distortion, which is what you get when you turn the amp really loud, and then everything starts to really compress. The transformers are kind of coming into play then, you know, and for example, I think you can hear that tone really well on like Blues Breakers albums, Cream. You can hear it on, for example, Layla, where they're using Dwayne Allman and Eric Clapton are using Fender Champs, and just wide open and full blast, and you know, you can hear the power amp distorting. So that's kind of a thing you need to think about. You know, what kind of distortion you want, and obviously, again, think about your situation as a musician. Are you playing at home for fun? Are you playing in a church? Are you playing, you know, Wembley Arena? You know, and then you need to decide, you know, can I take this amp to that volume to achieve that distortion? You know, that's really the question. Or do I need to use an overdrive pedal? And you know, you're going to get very different, not very different, but you're going to get different overdrive from an overdrive pedal. Then obviously you can use an overdrive pedal as a boost to slam the front end of an amp and then get overdrive that way. So there's kind of different ways to achieve it. But I think if you have, you know, the conclusion of this video is, if you have a sound in your head, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to achieve, you know, your desired, you know, your sound becomes a reality. And because in one way, that artist that you like has done all the hard work, they've done all the research, you know, they've found that they need this speaker with this amp, and with this speaker cable and this guitar cable, and you know, that's how they achieve that sound. And then you can just literally copy that. It's going to be quite easy. The hard bit comes with the volume situation, where you might go and do what this artist has done, but then you're going to find that you can't get it to the required volume to achieve their tone. So that's when you're going to have to start thinking, okay, I need a smaller amplifier, you know. And really, that's really where it's happened for me. The sort of gigs that I'm playing, I'm not, you know, well-known artist. I do small gigs, I do clubs, festivals, art centres, things like that. And generally, you know, playing small amplifiers myself nowadays is really the solution. So I'm kind of playing these projector amps, 14 watts, and I can really push them on a gig. I can really kind of get that sweet spot, and it blooms and it got this beautiful kind of sound. And then for my overdrive tone, the way I get my overdrive nowadays is from a Dunbar style amp, which is always on the overdrive channel. So I've kind of got the best of both worlds. I've got a really beautiful clean sound, which is just pushing, and then I've got a nice smooth overdrive, which is always on tap, and it's, you know, not from a pedal, it's from you know, the preamp distortion, you know. So that's kind of just the way personally I've gone. But you know, you need to go the way you need to go, for the situation that works for you. And like I said, there's no right amp or wrong amp. It's just what's right for yourself in your situation. So try to put things like looks. You know, you want a big Marshall combo, a big Marshall stack. You know, try to put that away and really think. Okay, think about the sound. That's got to be your number one priority. What sound are you trying to achieve? What tone are you trying to achieve? And where are you going to play this amp? If you have a small amp that you can play in the kitchen every morning before you go to work, as one of my friends does, that, you know, that really works for him, and it's only 5 watts, you know, but it's a really cool little amp, valve amp that you can sort of crank up and play in the morning along to the radio, and you know, he has a lot of fun doing that. So it could be that you know, you're in a blues band and you want a small tweed amp like a Princeton. You know, Fender Princetons are great amps because, you know, as Larry Carton used one with Steely Dan, you know, you can get a great tone at a moderately lower volume, you know. But really, that's what I'm trying to get across in this video, is the fact that don't be sold by you know, people telling you you need this 100 watt amp, you know, you need this 50 watt amp, it's the best amp. No, you need the amp that right for your situation and for the tone that you're hearing in your head, and then you kind of make a path to get that sound, you know. And I've got a friend here. He lives on an island. He's on often comments on the YouTube, and he plays in. I think he plays every night, and he knows who he is. But he's using. I think a guy made it in England. It's like a Dumble clone. It's like a 45 watt amp. You know, so you know, that works for him in his situation, and he's doing really well with it. You know, so I'm not saying that if you're playing in a small bar that you should only be playing through a 15 watt amp. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that, for example, what I'm saying to you is, if you want to sound like Eric Clapton did in the Blues Breakers, then you're probably going to get fired after one gig if you're playing in a bar, because Eric Clapton had a Marshall on full blast, you know, and in the 60s that was acceptable in the places he was playing, but it's probably not going to be acceptable nowadays. So to achieve that same tone, you know, with an amp with 2 channels, where one channel gets your overdrive or you use it from a pedal, that's how you're going to replicate Eric Clapton's tone, you know. Or it could be that you have a Fender Champ, a really 5 watt, really small little amp, and you drive it, and that's how you get that, you know, that replicate Jimi Hendrix's sound, for example. But you know, again, a 5 watt amp may sound small. You know, this is the thing with 5 watt amps; they can sometimes sound really small. Whereas a 45 watt amp, although you won't be able to drive it, it's going to sound bigger and wider. So you know, you need to weigh these things up in your mind and maybe try a few different amplifiers. But maybe we're going to do a part 2 of this video, because it could go on forever. There's lots of things to think about, but hopefully this has given you some food for thought. Write some comments, ask me some questions, and I'll be happy to answer anything you want to know. Until then, take care, all the best.